Alrighty, hello Running Program community. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome back to another episode um of our Zoom podcast recording sessions where I invite instructors to share about any websites or technologies they have been using in any of their running program courses, which include English 101, 101.10, 145, and 145.13. First, let me introduce myself. I am Edcel Javier Cintron-Gonzalez. I am the current Professional Development Technology Coordinator of the Writing Program Leadership Team. And I'm excited to have with me today Alexa Parker joining us today. So, Alexa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Edsel. Yeah, I'm Alexa Parker. I'm a second year master's student in literary and cultural studies, and I'm also an instructor of English 101.
All right. Thank you so much for that introduction. So, today we're really excited because we're going to show something a little bit different from the other episodes. Today, Alexa will be talking to us about Perusall. So, I guess I want to start by asking, what is Perusall?
Yeah, so Perusall is a free online platform that instructors can use to facilitate annotation and discussion as a class online. And I found it from a webinar about teaching medieval studies and then modified it for English 101.
Ooh, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned annotation just now, and that reminds me a little bit about one of our learning outcomes, which is peer and self assessment. Um, can you talk to us a little bit more about how you use Perusal in your own English 101 classroom?
Yeah, so I'll often upload articles that I want students to discuss or have them annotate chat maps, which are two big things for English 101 grassroots articles and chat mapping. So I'll have them annotate on that. So they'll highlight in the document or on the chat map somewhere and type comments and reply to each other's comments. Um, and it kind of facilitates discussion asynchronously um, in the same way that a face-to-face classroom would.
Yeah, and that's very good to know because, and I think I can speak for all of us that because of the pandemic, a lot of us are still getting used to the whole idea of online teaching. I don't know about you, but
Yeah,
that's still, I'm still quite adapting to online teaching, especially now that I'm teaching a literature course. And yeah, and thinking about teaching a writing course too, that's that's also like interesting to think about. How has been your experience teaching 101 during the online medium or during this pandemic?
yeah, it's been a huge adjustment. My teaching style is very much like activity based. So usually I'll talk for like 5 minutes and then send them into groups to do something on their own to get that hands-on learning. So trying to figure out how to do that online was really difficult for me. Um, and I had to get creative and find some tools that would allow me to do that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Especially to keep that active learning and engagement within the classroom community. And I know that it looks different online, but it can also be challenging to figure out ways to like do what we used to do inside the classroom space, but also bring it towards the online space, whether we're decided to teach writing courses synchronously or asynchronously.
For sure.
Based on your usage of Perusal, how do you think Perusal can benefit a, for example, writing program instructor, or how can Perusal be adapted towards any of our writing program pedagogy?
Yeah, so I think what you brought up earlier about peer and self-assessment, it's really good for that because students like engage directly with one another and give each other feedback um, on their thoughts and like questions about different things going on in the articles. It's really good for engaging with grassroots articles, which are a huge part of our writing program. And kind of getting that hands-on like work with the articles so they can comment directly in them and work with them more closely.
Yeah, and I like that idea because one of the biggest things that, well, at least what I want to do when I think about, well, and this is me thinking about when I used to teach 101, is finding out ways to make the grassroots article discussions more engaging to students and more meaningful too, because like it's not the same as asking them to learn all these different concepts, but also how to how to encourage them to integrate what they've learned into something they like, for example. And I think that's the beauty and essence of what grassroots articles do, that students find in very practical ways the different terms that we teach them and then apply them towards this genre.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be hard to check that they've been doing that type of work too. And perusal kind of forces them to get deeper into the article and like get that learning that you were just talking about.
All right. So before we show our audience a little bit more about Perusal, are there any other learning outcomes that you have in mind when using activities via Perusal?
Yeah, I would say it's also good just for general like cultures and communities. I believe that's like learning outcome 8. But yes, it's very good for that. They learn how to engage like with each other in a way that's really respectful and just kind of build a nice classroom community. Um, because in other discussion formats, sometimes students um, are too scared to talk or just kind of sit in the background and hope it goes by. But in the perusal, they're all forced to engage with each other um, and talk about the text. So I think it's pretty good for that learning outcome as well if you're looking for just a way to build that community.
Yeah, and a good way to encourage participation too. All right. So I think we're ready to show our audience a little bit about Perusal. So why don't we move on to sharing our screens?
All right, let me get this up. And so this is the course home of Perusal. This is what you see when you get to just straight up into the course. I've created an example of what a typical Perusal course looks like for me with just a few different examples. Um, so you have your course library, and this is where the main stuff all is. To add stuff into your library as an instructor, you go here. You can add different folders. So I sorted mine into articles, chat map, videos, but you could also do it by units, by weeks, whatever works best for you. And you just, click add, upload a document, a web page, an image file. Um, it pretty much is good with all of those things. So, here in the videos, I have a YouTube video. Chat maps, I have an image, and articles, I have a PDF.
Yeah, and by seeing this, I like how organized it looks in the Perusal space, because people can clearly see like which articles are we gonna discuss, for example, and then activities such as chat map that usually in person we will get very artistic at the writing program and bring markers, posters, and students will create actual maps in the classroom. So I will just thinking about it, how to transfer that digitally. And I just think it's very neat of how Perusal also offers that option too.
Yeah, and yeah, with chat maps, one of the things that was hard for me getting into the online like format was one of the things I would do was have during class time, as a class, we'd make a chat map about a genre, and we would use the whiteboard and we would all like write on the chat map. But I couldn't do that online, and especially asynchronously online. I was like, how do I recreate that? So Perusal is kind of how I ended up doing that. If you want, I could show the chat map now while we're on the topic.
Oh yes, please do.
Okay. So this is what it looks like. For me, when I do this on Perusal, I just uploaded an image of like a slide I had made about chat with the different chat terms and their definitions. And when I ask students to annotate this, they will I'll give them a genre we're going to be talking about. So in this example, the genre I would have given them is the 5-paragraph essay. And so they'd be chat mapping the 5-paragraph essay. So each student would highlight a chat term and add in a comment for it. So to look at comments and annotations in Perusall, you go to the side and you can do current conversation or all conversations, which is usually what I do. Things that are bolded mean you have the instructor or whoever's viewing it has not read it yet. These I have read, but you just click on it and it shows where it's highlighted. So it's pink here, and that means it was highlighting that section of the text. So student 1 in this example said for production of an essay, you might need a computer, laptop, keyboard, and Microsoft Word. And the other student said you could also use Google Docs instead of Word. And then you can just go through and go to the next thread. And this student had commented, the teacher would grade the essay for reception. And this student also commented, this fake student commented, you might have a peer review day to get other students' opinions on your essay for activity. So they would all be doing that. There'd be more comments in an actual classroom, but they all comment different things and add to each other's ideas on the chat map.
Yeah, and I really like how interactive it is too, and how students can just comment on each other and have this conversation going. It kind of feels like when you have a conversation like via Facebook Messenger, for example, or an Instagram, like that's the kind of vibe I feel when I'm seeing now the current conversations in this section
Yeah,
of the chat map.
yeah, and as an instructor too, another cool feature is you can click to tell the students this was a helpful comment, and so they say upvoted by instructor. So it's a quick way to give some feedback on their comments as well, and just tell them, you know, that you did a good job. And you can also respond to in your own words, but um, yeah, that's another kind of feature that reminds me of like Reddit on social media or something, where you just upvote the comment.
Yeah, and it's a really good way to give a quick uptake too, when thinking about that.
Yeah, and it reminds me of when you're in the classroom and there's like a discussion going on, and like you can respond right away and say like, "Oh yeah, that's like a really good comment, Jason," or something like that, and then like move on and just give them that quick feedback that kind of lets them know they're on the right track.
Yeah, and it's really good too because we also talked about earlier about the 5 paragraph essay as an example. So for those of you watching us and are not aware of it, one of the main reasons our writing program in ISU is a little bit different when it comes to teaching first year composition is that we don't it's not a class that focuses on teaching the different genres of essay writing. While we do acknowledge that those are important, we like to challenge our students into thinking of writing as an exploration of genre itself, which is why in the chat map we do teach 101 for a cultural historical activity theory, where we actually analyze the full production of writing a different type of writing genre. So for example, if not the 5 paragraph essay, we would ask students to um explore, what it's like writing a social media post and how is it different across the different social media. If you're interested more in business writing, you could ask students to analyze a personal statement versus a cover letter, and how might those genres be different. So I think illustrating chat maps, especially in Perusal, it's a lot useful and to serve that purpose and to still get that same engagement from students when interacting with the different genres that they're exploring.
Yeah, that's what I really enjoy, and it's like they're writing on that whiteboard just again, but virtually.
All right. So I'm very interested to see how students interact with the grassroots articles in terms of annotating and engaging in that practice.
Yeah, of course. So I just go over to my library. I'll click this article by Joyce R. Walker. It's one of the first ones I assigned to introduce chat. So I can just go to all conversations again. And as we can see here, there's a few different things that I've already engaged with as an instructor. This one, if you see this little question mark icon, that means the student asked a question. Perusal automatically, if there's a question mark in their sentence, marks it as a question. So you can see here, this student asked like about this specific passage about breaking down a genre. They asked, how do you guys think breaking down genres while writing helps you become a better writer? So they can pose questions to other students, and the other student responded with a really thoughtful comment that I actually really think is a good answer. So I'll let them know it's helpful. But they let them know what they kind of taught the student themselves. They took on the teacher role and taught the other student, engaged. And oftentimes when someone asks a question, there'll be multiple different answers and they'll all build off of each other, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, and it's really quite different too because just thinking of in-person classroom, for example, like as well as a classroom community, we're kind of restrictive in terms of like the timing and how many people students actually get to talk to and ask like similar questions, as in the kind of feedback they receive. So I can really see a lot of value in Perusal because lots of people can just read the same question and then just leave multiple comments, and it's a way for the whole classroom to get involved in this conversation.
Yeah, and that can be really difficult to do asynchronously too. So if you are teaching asynchronously, this is a really good tool to get that vibe that you'd get synchronously or in person. Yeah. So then there's just, other comments too. So students will oftentimes like annotate what they think is really important from the reading. That's something I typically ask them to do is ask questions, point out things that are important, or point out things that connect to either your own life or like to other stuff we've learned. So this student had said, I think this is really important. They talked about in high school how they didn't feel very trained in all genres. They felt like they were very focused on the 5 paragraph essay. So they didn't know how to approach new genres, and doing genre analysis was really helpful for that. And this other student agreed with them and said using genre analysis and chat, we'll be able to dig deeper and understand what we're writing rather than just following the instructions. And yeah, there's more like this. And in this, I wanted to kind of show you guys, how you can respond as an instructor as well to get more conversation going. So this student said it's interesting to know about representation, how like each person will plan differently. And I just added to their comment, yes, and it won't be the same for depending on the genre as well. And then that usually other students will respond to what we were both saying too. And it just builds a really nice conversation.
It's also interesting because, well, if we want to think about it deeper, like the art of annotating can also be considered its own genre to learn as well, because it's not as easy as picking a random section and just leaving a comment. It really does require a student to read the whole article and really think back of what they're really interested to know about a specific section of the article, and what kind of feedback or questions they probably want from their classmates, kind of a way to like that kind that kind of student to student communication.
Yeah. And if you're thinking about doing something like this for anyone that wants to kind of take up this activity, a good way to approach it is with genre analysis. So have students before they even do annotation, figure out what the rules of an annotation are before going into it. Treat it like any other genre, and like set up the rules as a class for what your annotation should look like.
Yes, and definitely for asynchronous learning, it's a really very interactive way to not only not only encouraging students to read the assigned articles, but also interact with them. So I think it's really neat how Perusal gives you that option and these tools to do so.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that Perusal is also helpful with video discussion.
Yes. So I uploaded one of our popular videos in the writing program. I just put in a YouTube link in the library and it just embeds it here, kind of like on ReggieNet Lessons, if you're familiar with that. it just embeds it. And students can pause. They can hit play and pause whenever they want to comment something. So I had a student example I put in here of they paused like right around here and said, "This reminds me of what you've been talking about with translingualism." So they connected back to one of our writing program learning outcomes. And I thought that was cool. So I upvoted it and responded as well, saying that's an excellent connection. But it's really easy this way because they can just pause at any time whenever they feel like they want to say something and type it and then just continue watching the video, uh, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I really like this feature because sometimes with video, it's hard to pinpoint the exact part or ask, for example, a student to remember what part are you referring to of the video we saw in class. So it's really neat that Perusal actually marks the moment where they do a comment, because that way it's easier to trace back the exact moment of the video where the student had this idea or made this kind of connection with what they're learning about the writing program, the learning outcomes, and the production of genre for our English 101.
Yeah, yeah, you can click exactly where they were and watch it again just to make sure you know what they're talking about, which is really cool. I totally agree.
All right. So I really like all these neat features about Perusal. And since you mentioned ReggieNet, I guess my follow-up question would be, so when comparing to ReggieNet, how do you see Perusal as like a learning management system? Do you prefer it more than ReggieNet? Um, I'm kind of interested in those thoughts about Perusal.
Yeah, so I tend to prefer it more than ReggieNet discussion forums. I think my students prefer it too because in my surveys they say more perusal, less forums. I think it's just easier for them to use. It's easier for them to use and makes it easier to see what everyone else is saying than discussion forums do. Obviously, I can't completely uh, like replace ReggieNet with Perusal. A lot of the features that ReggieNet has, such as ReggieNet lessons, are really useful. But for doing reading activities and doing discussion, hands down, I will probably always choose Perusal. And I might even incorporate it in the future when we're not in a pandemic. So, yeah.
Yep. And hopefully that will come soon, as lots of people continue
Yes.
to get their vaccines and be social distance and follow the safety protocols. So just to clarify, you mentioned that Peruso, so to make an account of Peruso, it's free for
Mhm.
instructors. I'm curious, so so are students also required to make an account in order to use Peruso? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, so Perusal's free to make an account and to upload and use all of it. It was designed by instructors for instructors, so I think profit's not their main concern. It was more about usability and access, which is really cool. But yes, students have to make an account. And when you make your course as an instructor, you are given a unique course code. It's usually your last name with some random numbers, and you give that to the students. So they make their account. I tell them to use their Ilstu email so that there's no privacy concerns. But if they don't want to, they can use another email, and they just put in their names um, and that course code, and they're able to use it for free as well.
yeah, and knowing that's really useful too, especially in the beginning of the semester when you tell students that we're using other technologies besides ReggieNet. Um, and that's really important to clarify and clear out because I know some people get maybe anxiety if they have to use like a bunch of different technology and they don't feel confident in their knowledge or use of technology. But for what we've seen, Peruso is, I think it's a really great tool for many different activities, especially when we're teaching in the online space.
Yes, yeah. I think so too. And the setup process is super easy. It's very easy to set up. Even for an instructor setting up the whole course, it takes maybe 15 minutes. For students, getting an account is maybe 5 minutes, unless they don't know their email or have to set up something new. But it's like a 5-minute process. And then once you get into Perusall, it has a tutorial set up. So whenever you click something, it tells you how to use it. And it's super accessible that way.
Yeah, and I like it that because we've been talking about how useful Perusal is for an English 101 setting, but really, for example, for my own English 170 and teaching children's literature, I will find the annotation, and lots of the other features super useful in other classroom settings as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I guess my follow-up question would be, well, and I guess one of my finishing questions would be, so why would so thinking about Perusal and what we talked about today, would you recommend Perusal to other writing program instructors? And thinking about writing program pedagogies, like why would you recommend Perusal as an option to use for teaching either for first year composition courses or any other courses that we teach here in the writing program?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I think it would be useful whether you're teaching online asynchronously, synchronously, hybrid, or even face to face. It really provides a way for students to more directly interact with a reading or an assigned video like a TED Talk, um, or anything. It's really just like more interactive that way than discussion forums or even sometimes just like face-to-face discussion. It can be really helpful if you are going to have face-to-face discussion to have them do this ahead of time so they come in really prepared to have a really good engaging discussion. But it also can be really good just for providing an alternative to that modality. And I've really enjoyed the outcome of that as an instructor. It really just shows like it forces students to be really careful and close with their readings and how they interact with the text. And I think it forces them to remember some of those terms and concepts like chat and even like any other article that comes up and brings up a writing program concept. It forces them to really closely engage with that concept and understand it.
Right. And that's a lot of good reasons to why lots of our writing program instructors will want to use Perusal and hopefully soon, and especially thinking of their preparation for next semester's courses and um whatever the semester will bring us. Are so Alexa, do you want to say any closing remarks?
Yeah, thanks for having me, first of all. And second of all, I hope everyone watching can get something out of this and um, gets to use Perusal. I know it's been really great for me, and I'm sure it will continue to be great for other instructors as well.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, Alexa, it was lovely to have this conversation with you, and thank you so much for stopping by and talking and showing us about Perusal. I'm sure lots of us in the writing program will benefit greatly from this conversation that we had today.
Thank you so much.